huge update, guys. 10.1, gigantic update. You talk about how you listen to player feedback and worked with your team to implement the things that they wanted changed, as well to adding things that maybe players didn't know they wanted but needed.
For the UI, we have very exciting updates for sure. So all classes who have a class resource UI, like the Warlock shards and, Holy Runes and for Paladins, etc., they are getting a UI revamp because we had the whole time, to revamp our UI. It looks more and cool, better accessibility. So we want to make sure that the classes are also getting that. So we're going to get Feral Druid, Paladin, Arcane Mage, Death Knights, Windwalk Monk, Rogue, and Warlock. They're all getting. Two that I would love to highlight, for example, the Feral Druid, they're getting unique combo point now and unique animation. So for example, when you have your combo point use, you see like a cat claw, like scratching that UI. So it looks really cool, very different from the Rogue, which will have like daggers and stuff. So that's nice. And for the Paladins, it's the one that it changed the most, but for the best. We updated the Holy Power art. It's inspired by the Ashbringer Holy Rune, so for sure the Paladin's gonna, get very excited about that. And we improved accessibility a lot on that one. The previous one was a little smaller, a bit hard to see. Now it's much bigger. It has a plate on it, so it looks great on the unit frame and also when you have your personal resources. And much more. I'm very excited to see what players gonna react when they see all that update. And also edit mode, we got tons of feedback and ideas for the edit mode, so we are adding that as well. With more things being added, we now have a check mark for advanced options that if you click that, it shows more options, but we made sure to have the basic ones at the top, so it's a little easier for you to find what you're looking for. One thing that was very, very requested, it was a scalable minimap. We got feedback from players who play on laptops that it was too big. So we added an option that you can now control how big you want your minimap to be, and you can actually make even bigger if you like to. Another thing that we added was we got a lot of requests from retro druids because the buffs were not showing all of them in the raid frame. So now in edit mode, you can scale your raid frame a little more, a little wider. So that will make buffs fit there better. So instead of only 3, you can see up to 7. So if you make really wider, you can see a lot in there. So that's great for classes that have a lot of buffs. And we have so much more. The list is long, but these are like the main highlights for community feedback regarding UI and what's coming in Embers of Niltarian Frost.
Things that they didn't know they wanted. Niffen, Niffen for sure. who'd have thought mole people are like the cutest people? So you'll meet this new culture, the Niffen, or lovingly we call them the Sniffen because they have big old noses. In the underground of Zaralek Caverns in their hometown of Loam. So, that's a major faction. They're going to have a renown track that you're going to get to earn a bunch of new cosmetics with them. But those, I think, are one of my favorite things. I think cross-faction guilds is actually something that kind of surprised people to see in the Embers of Niltarian update. It's such a big, shift in World of Warcraft. Guilds and factions have been such an established, thing in our game for so long that having that big of a change in an update like Embers of Niltarian I think is a big deal and probably surprised some people. But personally, I'm excited about it. We added cross-faction instances with Dragonflight launch, which allowed a lot of people to make new friends, create new bonds, new raid groups, new Mythic Plus groups, and now being able to be in the same guild I think was going to be a really awesome perk for them.
It's funny because there's two sides to that coin. Is that like you have the purists who just like, no, I want my cross-faction realms just playing alt on the Horde so you can play with me. But then you have people like me who like, I want to play with both, like, can't we just play on, and you guys do. And it's led to some funny moments with the cross-dungeoning. If it's 4 Horde players and 1 Alliance player, which is usually me, and I die, they go, did Greg die again? It's like, yeah, Alliance. And they shrug. You know what I mean? They're so awesome. Soft over there, like.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that if you want. Like, if you want to keep your Alliance or Horde guild Alliance and Horde, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. But this is just about giving players the option to do that if they'd like. And yeah, with that's a feature actually you kind of mentioned that people have asked for, which is like, when can I like queue into LFR and get the opposite faction? That's not something that will be in this update, but definitely something that we're looking at for down the road.
I also feel like when you guys add new fractions to the game, it's kind of a double-edged blade because you're like, this is this cool new this new race that's in there. It's like, cool, can we play it? When can we choose? When that cannot be an allied race? You get the pounding on the desk. Like, do you have anything to say to that, like about that? Because you have so many races in the game, and everyone has their propriety of what race that they can't play that they want to play. You guys added mechanomes and other awesome allied races. Like, how do you guys continue to work with the community to figure out what? Because I know it's not. Talk to your designers before. It's not an easy task to just add a race, right? Because there's a bunch of like back end work that has to be done for mounting and certain helms and shoulder pads and all this other stuff.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the beauties of cross-faction guilds, right? Is one of those things that might have prevented you from, say, rolling that Mechanome or the Volpera or something that you really were excited about was, well, my guild is, Alliance, and the faction I want to be is Horde, so maybe I can't do that. But with this update, that's a big, for me at least, that would be the biggest barrier. Is I really want to stick with that social group. I've been with my same guild for like a decade plus, right? Like, all right, well, I guess I don't get to play that faction or that Alliance race that I wanted to play. And that's something that with this update you'll be able to do moving forward. So we think that's really awesome. And we have really fun data of like, how many of our instance groups were cross-faction going into Dragonflight. Right. So having that data to see like, okay, well, how many people actually are going to move around on their faction or their races when this change comes in. So, those are always fun data points to look at. But ultimately, we want players to have that freedom of expression, to be able to express themselves in the game and be able to do that in any number of ways. And which race you play in is certainly one of the big ones.
Now, Laura, I know UI is one of those things that's super important, but always gets seemed like short-sighted from like the community standpoint. Like they don't know how the importance of it is. And you redid the whole UI for this expansion. Not you personally, but your team did the whole UI for this expansion, and you learned so much from it. And I was a purist. I really enjoyed I have always had the classic UI since the inception. I have a couple add-ons for DPS meters and stuff like that, but I've always wanted to. I really enjoyed the UI changes. Like it took me a while to get used to them, but you made it so easy to move around and kind of customize my playstyle the way I want to do it, which was difficult before because people say, "Oh, have this add-on and this add-on and this add-on," and then you can some add-ons you can't move. Some add-ons are stagnant and like they're just there. I really want to get your feedback on how difficult of a challenge it was to create that UI and then continue to creatively evolve it in 10.1.
Yeah, it was a very nice project to work on, and I would say the biggest challenge we had was understanding that we have players that plays this game for 18 years, and we have the new players. We have players that are a little more, come and go, and by patch or expansion, and we want to make sure that we could make everybody happy. So we couldn't go too modern, we couldn't go, too classic, otherwise what's the goal of this? So it was finding that middle ground that would make everyone happy. And one way that we found to do this was looking to, of course, the add-ons, what people like the most, what makes them easy, and what players from all levels are using. So and also looking at other games, like what is a new MMO, what they're bringing to the UI. So nowadays it's pretty common to have add emotes, and some years ago that could be a little weird as a default, but not today. So let's bring that to WoW and make sure 18 years old players make sense. Like I make sure it makes sense that I have an edit mode. I want that for many years, and new players gonna come in and like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I played another game that had this before. This is not too complicated. So that was one of the things that we really wanted to do right away. And on the art side, we analyzed a lot the classic UI and how we could find the shapes. They're very iconic. So, like the square with cut corners, that's very WoW style.
The griffins,
colors, the griffins, and the colors, that gold, that to us, we kind of like, maybe that represents Alliance, and the metal, that probably represents Horde. So we had that kind of like connection. We're trying to try and make sense of things that were done like 18 years ago, but they do make sense. So we keep that. And for sure, players in a way associate those colors with WoW UI. And of course, our gold yellow and, the class colors, all that stayed because that's part of the language of our user interface. And there's a lot to do. And still, like we have panels like achievements is still the old one. We have, even the LFRQ panel is still, the old school one. And as we improve those features, we're gonna do the revamp as we go. So we wanna pretty much give that base HUD and see people's reaction, which was very positive. And from there, keep working on the next updates. And with this update, you can see all the things that we added based pretty much on the community feedback for the edit mode. And in the future, we're going to see much more. So it's an ongoing project, like we said since the beginning, and it's our high priority for sure.
One of the things that's really cool is you guys have a new underground zone. Now, we've gone underground before, but this is completely different. In the PTS, I was seamlessly kind of just thrown into it. I could fly down there, this long cavern, kind of like Caverns of Time, and it just opens up. There's no instancing, there's no portal, there's no loading. What went into something like that? Because that's the first time you guys have really done something that to this scale.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's not something that we're like talking about too widely as like, look at this cool feature, because ultimately it's a really awesome piece of technology that our engineers put together, and like, we always kind of joke like, best case scenario, you don't know we did anything, right?
Yeah, right.
like that's a huge win. You're just like, oh, cool, I made it underground, neat. But yeah, that was definitely something that our engineering team put a lot of time and effort into, kind of doing what like I think internally we called it like airlock tech, right? Where you're kind of traveling through a space and you don't really see a load bar, but while you're traveling through that space, we're actually doing a lot of loading behind the scenes so that you can kind of seamlessly transfer into that underground zone. So really cool tech that the team put together. Excited about what opportunities that opens for us as well. Like I know the encounter designers, right? The Dungeon and Raid group are licking their chaps about like, oh, so we could like walk down a tunnel and suddenly be like in a whole new world almost, right? Like, yeah, technically we could do that. Like so there's a lot of cool opportunities that it also opens up for us moving forward.
It's like you said, like it's a small thing that like players like that's like 4 years of engineering.
Right. Yeah.
It's like this little thing, and but it's a little thing, but it's also huge in the economy of the system of the game as well, which is just awesome to see. You're going underground. You guys have lots of different things for players to do now in 10.1. It used to be like back in the day, like, if you wanted high tier gear, you did the raids. If you wanted PvP, you get the PvP, and PvE was basically story. You played the story and you were done. You guys have opened this up exponentially, and not just with 10.1, but with Dragonflight in general, rewarding the player for doing anything. Professions, mini games, exploration, world questing, PvP, PvE. What goes into that? Because I know WoW's always a fine-tuning balance of getting gear too fast or not fast enough. Did this open any problems for the team on like a design level? Because now you can get gear doing anything instead of just like two kind of focused things, PvP and raiding.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, that was actually a major goal of ours moving into Dragonflight that we're really carrying into the Embers on Eltharion update, is this idea of, like you said, kind of play however you want to play. Like if you really enjoy raiding, in previous expansions, maybe there were things that you felt like you were almost required to do before you could step foot in the raid. That's really something that we took a major look at philosophically, took a big step back and just really looked at, what are our options to reward people with. Obviously renown is a really cool thing. People love cosmetics. There's the new Slither Drake, right? And Zaralek Caverns, and maybe you're someone who loves raiding, but I know plenty of people who are like into mythic raiding who also are huge mount collectors, right? So if you want to go get that mount, that's totally an option for you, but it's not something that you feel might hold you back from playing, the segment or the section of the game that you're really excited about. And yeah, that's just a continuation of that philosophy of play how you want to play, and trust that will reward you. And also, like we've extended some of these higher item level rewards into the outdoor world through professions, right? The professions update for Dragonflight was a major undertaking for the team, and the community has given us a ton of really awesome feedback. We're constantly looking at iterating there, but that's been carried forward with us into the Embers on Eltharion update, where those players who play in the outdoor world, there's lots of cool opportunities to craft higher item level gear, if they work their way towards that. Another actually big update with Embers on Eltharion is the item upgrade system got a major revamp. That was one of those things that we were looking across the game, looking at the different aspects of our PvE games, and we were like, okay, we got Valor, we've got these Primal Storms currency, like there's all these different currencies that are giving you rewards, item level, loot, but there were these different ways to upgrade that, and it just like got kind of complex, and we're constantly having to relearn how these systems work. So we really look to unify that under one kind of item upgrade system, where you'll be earning flight stones. The way I think about it is just basically two currencies you'll have to kind of remember. One is flight stones, which is just the like equivalent of, yeah, you're doing an activity, you're going to get some experience, here's some flight stones, like that. Very almost like, how hard is this thing? How long does it take? Cool, that's how many flight stones you're going to get. Versus the Shadowflame crests, which are more act as almost like a high watermark of how challenging the content you're doing is, or maybe how rare the thing you're doing is. You'll get a higher item level crest for that, and then that will let you upgrade not just the item, but the way I also have been thinking about it is like you're almost upgrading the item slot, right? Where in those previous systems, like Valor is always the one I use as an example. I don't know how other people used to use Valor, but I would hoard it, right?
Yeah.
I would just
wait. You
sit
want
on
to
it.
wait. You want to hold it. Yeah.
Exactly. Because I know I'm going to upgrade this trinket, and then next week I'm going to get that exact same trinket at higher item level in my Great Vault, and I don't want to waste my Valor. So we really wanted to kind of avoid that buyer's remorse with this new upgrade system, where you're not just upgrading the item with your flight stones, but you're also upgrading the item slot with your Shadowflame crest. So that way you can feel free to upgrade that, and you're not gonna worry about, oh, I just upgraded this and I got a different item, I wasted that. No, it's totally going to carry forward with you, because you're kind of upgrading your character's item level potential, not these items item level potential. So that's very much a cool system that we're excited to get in the players' hands.
And one of your regions of currencies, you can actually get it passively, it generates on its own as well. For the catalyst, I believe, when you getting tier gear, destroying old tier gear to upgrade new tier gear.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the first time you guys have given a passive kind of region or passive thing that you didn't have to earn, that you just get X per week or X per month?
Right. Well, you do still have to earn the items that you then put into the catalyst.
Yeah,
right?
you
So
still
that's
have to
kinda
get the items to upgrade them, but the
Right.
region to upgrade them is now given passively.
Right.
Some of it is given passively.
Mm-hmm. And that's similar to actually what we did with Zereth Mortis, our update 9.2, where the catalyst was first introduced. It was kind of a passive currency that you were getting. And then with the Dragonflight, we changed it to be that kind of account-wide quest. But with the Embers on Eltharion update, we're kind of going back to that first iteration, where it just kind of is passively accruing. Because again, when we were thinking about the investment in this set item, you had to go earn an item to put into that to
sometimes it was a very
level.
long chain. It took dozens of hours or lots of interesting niche things to do, do this dungeon and have it drop and then grab it and then you get it, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So once you've gotten the item, we didn't want you to then have to be okay, what's the next chain of events I need to do? We wanted you to just be excited for that item. And also that helps with kind of simplifying the system a little bit as well, which we're always looking at, the complexity of these things holistically, and making sure that that's not throwing people off too much. So yeah, very excited about all of the changes coming in Embers on Eltharion with your item upgrades.
And Laura, going back to the UI, the character and class identity is a big thing in the game now. People want to look the way they play, and you mentioned that the different UI interfaces will reflect paladins, druids, that kind of stuff. Is the end, I don't know if you have anything in the works, but is the end goal here to can I have a UI with my toolbar, my health bar, my action bars be all Death Knight themed? Can I have the Dragonflight UI be Death Knight themed? Is that something that you guys want to work toward eventually?
Probably not, but I have a fun fact to tell you that, the Griffin was actually from that idea long time ago. It was made to be dwarfs teamed, and then they had plans to make for all the races, but that's a lot of work, and it's also a lot of maintain.
That's kind of one of the beauties of World of Warcraft, though, right? When we talk about the UI, we talk about serving the broadest audience possible, right?
Right.
We don't want to overwhelm people, and we want to give them the options they need to be successful playing the game. But one of the beauties of World of Warcraft is your ability to customize, right? I can't think of almost any MMOs that have the same level of customization with your UI, right? There's so much stuff that you can do to your UI.
Not without having 20 different add. I'm a
Sure.
lifetime player. I don't want to put on 20 add-ons. I get overwhelmed really easily. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I'm sure if you were excited about having an art style with your UI, someone out there's probably built it, right? So that's one of the cool things about that if you really want to do that, there's an opportunity, I'm sure, to find someone who also had that same idea.
Yeah, the secret was that the Griffin was actually dwarf teamed, but turns out to be a lot of work, a lot of maintenance to create for all the races, so it just stayed that way. So what we did with this revamp was like, okay, we have the griffin, it symbolizes the alliance. Let's do the ribbon for the horde. And it feels like a nice balance to give that identity. So we stay with that. And then we will prefer to, be a little more about the combat and the fantasy, and that's where we want to have some cool UIs that, makes your gameplay much better and etc. instead of adding too much on the customization. But like Morgan said, like for sure there's some artists out there who it's passionate by druids or the Death Knight, and they want to do this cool little things with add-ons, and you can always add to your UI to personalize. And add-ons are great for accessibility as well, to make your UI yours, very very for your gameplay and for what you're looking for. But where we can add those kind of like fantasy touches, we'll keep doing that. It's very common where you have your character info pane, like there is a background that's related to your race, to your hometown, kind of thing. So we love to add those little things that it gives a lot of like personality and makes wow. So definitely still keep looking, but not at this moment for sure.
The engineering aspect of the flawless loading zones, and is that something that you guys eventually want to try to get into the whole World of Warcraft? I mean, I think there will always be a place for instancing, but like having it go smoother and more flawlessly can definitely be a thing after I've seen what I've seen in the PTS. Like, do you have plans for that, Morgan, going forward to try to do it for, like with other dungeons or other raids or other locations in the World of Warcraft universe?
Oh, right, totally. Nothing to announce, right? Like I don't want to get into spoilers, but like we said, it definitely people are already throwing around cool ideas of things that we could do using that new technology. And that's definitely something that, that's not something that we created and it's just going to sit there. Like people are very excited about the doors that opens up for us in the future.
And then my last question for you is, I always like to use my interviews as like a platform for you guys to be transparent and explain yourself, because I think a lot of people don't understand the back end of game development on an MMO that's over 15 years old. But people have been banging their fists. They want Dragonflight not only worldwide, but they want that same system applied to like Griffin mounts and their other mounts that they have. I know you guys have thought about it. I know it's a slow process, but can you explain for the audience out there, like what goes into just making those dragons like animated and work with that system, and why it's not just a copy paste into this Griffin, copy paste into this serpent type of thing across the board?
Adding dragon riding to a specific mount is actually, there's a whole suite of animations, right? Like there's the takeoff animation, like kind of the tucking your wings back behind you. And that's something that we worked really, really hard moving into Dragonflight to make sure that we really hit the mark with that visceral feeling of soaring through the air and, dive bombing really fast. And we wanted to make sure we hit the mark there, but that meant really laser focusing on those specific mounts. And when it comes to dragon riding moving forward, I don't know if we've announced anything there, but certainly based on player sentiment, player feedback, it's everybody from our team to the community sentiment we've heard, at least a lot of people that we've heard really enjoy it. So that's definitely something that we're talking about. Like, all right, how would we want to move this forward, taking this into future expansions even? What's the plan look like there? And, certainly the development of these animations on the mounts is one aspect, but also just making sure that it makes sense, right? Like you're dragon riding, there are wings, you're tucking back. Like there's plenty of mounts in World of Warcraft that are like, what does dragon riding on like Memoron's head look like, for instance, right? Like,
yeah, some don't even have wings. Like, how does that
right,
work, right?
Right, exactly. So those are all things that, we have to discuss and talk about. And, one of the things I know Ian's talked about in the past is we don't want to, negate all the effort that you've put into your mount collection, right? Like you've put in so much time and effort collecting these mounts, and for the longest time, it's been a purely cosmetic choice, right? So we don't want to kind of devalue that investment you put into those mounts. So we want to make sure that we move forward very carefully with dragon riding, taking all these things into consideration. Not too different from the conversation we were having earlier with factions in World of Warcraft, right? We want to move slowly, be very deliberate, hear player feedback, and then make sure that we're kind of rolling out any kind of plan paced out over time, rather than it being one big update all at once or something like that. So when you hear updates, they will be incremental, but I promise there's a plan in place there.
Just to add a little bit on that, we're also watching player feedback regarding flying and accessibility. Even though dragon riding is super fun, it's faster, it feels great, but we also got feedback from players that classic flying can be sometimes better, or easier for some people, or maybe in some kind of gameplay, I prefer the old style. So we are looking into ways that we can offer both, but especially for people that are really looking for the old one because it's just a little easier for them. So we want to make sure that we are very flexible on that way.
It's tough because players always like, what's the fastest way to get to whatever I'm doing? That's what I'm going to do, right? That's it's go to the fastest, shortest route, least possible resistance in order to get somewhere.
Yeah, it's a really funny kind of anecdote one of our lead level designer back in the day always shared with me when we were, I think with Shadowlands, we were talking about like, okay, well, like what if we speed up the flight path? Like how quickly can we make flight paths in Shadowlands go, when you're traveling from Ouroboros to one of the zones. Sorry, talking about Shadowlands for a second here. I swear there's a point.
There's a point.
And the anecdote he kind of shared with me, which is like, way back in the day, hotels were doing research on like, one of the points of feedback we get all the time is like, waiting on the elevator is no fun. How do we make our elevators faster? And like through tons of research, what they found was like the most effective thing was to just like put a mirror in front of the elevator. Which if you go now that I know that, every time I go around and look at hotels, I'm like, yeah, there's mirrors everywhere near the elevators, because really what you need is something to do. You need something to engage with rather than just waiting. So dragon riding is one of those things that I love so much because it makes the action of flying so much more engaging and so much more fun for me. But to Laura's point, that for some people is actually a barrier between them and fun. That engagement for me can cause problems for other people. So that's definitely one of those things that we're constantly kind of discussing and weighing how do we move forward and make sure we're being as inclusive as we can with our audience and the features that we're developing moving forward.
So when I see real-time reflections and mirrors everywhere, I can blame you. You're like, that's mirrors. That's how we fix everything.
In the game?
Put mirrors in World of Warcraft. They do it in elevators all the time.
Mirrors in video games is one of those things that's like,
right.
Speaking of seeing behind the scenes, it's like, so you want to render everything twice. That's what you're telling me you want to do?
And what does it do? Nothing. It does nothing. Just visually. Oh, okay.
Every time I see a mirror in a game, I'm like, are you actually a mirror? Or no, that's just an image. Got it.